While visiting my parents for my birthday, my father told the table, he was born a disappointment and proved me right every day since. If his mother hadn't begged me, I would have sent him to the army. Maybe they'd have beaten some worth into him. My mother nodded silently. My sister snorted and added, he'd probably trip over his own feet on the first day and cry for his mom. Everyone laughed while I sat there smiling. Last night, they were outside my apartment screaming at my window. The look on their face on the door cam was priceless. While visiting my parents for my birthday, my father told the table, he was born a disappointment and proved me right every day since. If his mother hadn't begged me, I would have sent him to the army. Maybe they'd have beaten some worth into him. My mother nodded silently. My sister snorted and added, he'd probably trip over his own feet on the first day and cry for his mom. Everyone laughed while I sat there smiling. Last night, they were outside my apartment screaming at my window. The look on their face on the door cam was priceless. Hey everyone, before we dive in, I have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and ensures you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. So I turned 31 last month. Shouldn't be a big deal, right? Just another year closer to the grave, lol. But my mom kept texting about how they needed to see me and how family is everything. Yeah, tell that to my therapist's bank account. I guess I should explain that my relationship with my family is complicated. And by complicated, I mean that they've spent my entire life making me feel like the human equivalent of a participation trophy. My dad, Glenn, has always been the type who shows love through criticism, except without the love part. Mom Terry is more of the silent enabler. And my sister Kristen somehow managed to inhale all the golden child oxygen in our house. I hadn't been home in like 8 months. Not since last Christmas, when Dad spent dinner explaining to my aunt how disappointed he was that I wasted my potential on computer nonsense instead of real work, whatever that means. I'd stopped defending myself years ago. What's the point when someone's already written your story for you? But there I was, driving 2 hours to my hometown on a Thursday night, listening to some true crime podcast to prepare myself for the family murder scene I was voluntarily entering. The mental gymnastics I do to convince myself this time will be different should qualify me for the Olympics. The house looked the same peeling paint on the garage door, same garden gnome with the chipped hat. Same feeling of dread as I parked on the street instead of the driveway because Dad always complained about oil spots. Mom hugged me at the door like I'd returned from war. Dad grunted from his recliner without looking away from the TV. Kristen was late as usual. Some things never change. Dinner was Mom's lasagna, which is objectively the only thing worth coming home for. We sat around the dining table, the one with the wobbly leg that Dad refuses to fix because it's fine if you don't lean on it. The conversation was the usual highlight reel of Christine's achievements. Her kids are apparently reading at a level that would make Shakespeare jealous. And a neighborhood gossip about people I barely remember. Then Mom brought out a small store-bought cake with a single candle. Apparently, they remembered my birthday. Plot twist. Dad finally looked at me directly and raised his beer. I should have seen it coming. The calm before the storm and all that. To Wesley, he said. And then it happened. He was born a disappointment and proved me right every day since. If his mother hadn't begged me, I would have sent him to the army. Maybe they'd have beaten some worth into him. The room went quiet, except for my mom's nervous laugh. She nodded along silently like this was just another one of Dad's jokes. 31 years of the same script. Kristen snorted and added that I'd probably trip over my own feet on the first day and cry for my mom. Everyone laughed. The greatest hits album of Wesley's Inadequacy was playing at full volume. But here's the weird part. I just sat there smiling, not the awkward grimace I usually wear when they do this. A genuine smile because something inside me just broke. Or maybe it finally fixed itself. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. See, I've spent my whole life trying to prove them wrong, trying to earn the approval of people who decided long ago that I wasn't worth approving of. And in that moment, with chocolate cake sitting in front of me like some sick consolation prize for enduring another year of existence in their eyes, I realized I didn't give a shit anymore. I ate my cake. I thanked my mother. I listened to more stories about how amazing everyone else's lives were, and I felt nothing, like actually nothing. It was the most peaceful birthday I'd had in years. On the drive home, I called my best friend Ryan and told him what happened. He went full rage mode, calling my family every name in the Urban Dictionary. I just laughed. He asked if I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I was. For context, I'm doing fine, better than fine. I've got my own place. I've got money saved. I've got friends who don't treat me like I'm one evolutionary step above pond scum. But my family still sees me as the kid who couldn't catch a baseball and cried when the other boys made fun of him. The next morning, I woke up to texts from Mom saying how nice it was to see me. Nothing about Dad's toast, nothing about Kristen's comment. Just thanks for coming. Like we'd had a normal family dinner where everyone wasn't emotionally waterboarding the birthday boy. I didn't respond. For the first time ever, I just didn't. A week went by, then another. Mom's texts got more frequent. Are you okay? Did something happen? Please respond. The audacity was almost impressive. Then Dad called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message about helping him install some smart home stuff because you're good with that computer crap. Not even a hint of awareness. It's been 3 weeks now. I've saved every text, recorded Dad's voicemails, screenshot Kristen's passive-aggressive FB messages asking if I'm being dramatic again. Last night I spent hours going through old family photos, emails, texts, documenting the pattern. 20 years of receipts. It's wild how clearly you can see the dysfunction when you're not drowning in it. You know what else I found? Dad's retirement plan is basically non-existent. Their house has 2 mortgages. Kristen's successful business she brags about is hemorrhaging money. And guess who co-signed those loans? Yep. Here's the thing. I'm not going to do anything crazy. I'm not planning some elaborate scheme. I'm just going to stop being their emotional punching bag and their safety net at the same time. They don't know that I know about their financial situation. They don't know that I've been talking to a therapist for years about their emotional abuse. They don't know that the computer nonsense they mock has put me in a position to completely walk away. They still think I need them. They have no idea that they're the ones who need me. So now I'm just waiting. Birthday dinner was a month ago. Christmas is coming. Mom's already texting about plans. Dad's hinting about help with bills. Kristen's kids want the new gaming system that she definitely can't afford. For 31 years, I've been trying to earn a place at their table. Now I'm building my own, and they're not invited. This is just the beginning. I've taken the first step by simply not responding, and they're already unraveling. Imagine what happens when they realize I'm never coming back to that table. But Tibosh, the weirdest part, I don't even feel angry anymore. I feel free. Update coming soon. Trust me, this story is just getting started. Update 1. Wow, didn't expect my last post to blow up like that. Thanks for all the support and the DMs. Some of you guys have family stories that make mine look like a Disney movie, lol. It's been 6 months since the birthday dinner incident. A lot has changed, but also nothing has changed, if that makes sense. Family dynamics are weird like that. So, after going radio silent for about a month, I finally responded to one of my mom's texts. Just a basic, been busy, all good type of message. Enough to keep her from filing a missing persons report, but not enough to actually engage. It's amazing how the bar is literally on the ground for me, but they expect me to pole vault over skyscrapers. Dad never noticed I was ignoring him because, surprise, he only calls when he needs something. Classic Glenn behavior. My sister Kristen sent me a novel-length FB message about how I was tearing the family apart by not responding to Mom's texts immediately. The irony of her defending the family unity while simultaneously treating me like garbage was chef's kiss. Anyway, Christmas rolled around. I told them I couldn't make it. Had a work thing. Mom sounded devastated on the phone. Dad grunted something about me always putting other things first. I muted the call and scrolled through Twitter while they guilt-tripped the void. Progress, I guess. The real tea started brewing in January. Remember how I mentioned their financial situation was a dumpster fire? Well, I did some digging. Nothing illegal, just basic internet searches and connecting dots from things they've mentioned over the years. Dad took early retirement 3 years ago, but didn't actually have enough saved. Their house has 2 mortgages because they kept refinancing to help Kristen get on her feet with her boutique business selling overpriced candles and essential oils. The business that, according to her Instagram, is thriving and blessing so many homes with positive energy. But here's the thing that really got me. Every year, for as long as I can remember, Dad has asked me to loan him money for random expenses. Car repairs, medical bills, new roof. I always sent it, knowing I'd never see that money again. I just accepted it as the tax I paid for being born a disappointment. In February, right on schedule, Dad called about the property taxes being higher than expected. Asked if I could help out with $2,000. I didn't say no exactly. I just said I'd have to check my finances and get back to him. Then I didn't. He called again 3 days later, left a voicemail about how family supports family and how he wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. I saved the voicemail and didn't call back. Mom texted next, said Dad was too proud to admit they were struggling, said she wouldn't ask if they had any other option, said they'd pay me back as soon as things turn around. I responded with, I'm a bit tight right now too. Have you asked Kristen? The silence was deafening for like 2 whole days. Then Mom replied that Kristen has the kids to think about and they wouldn't want to burden her. Translation: My sister, the golden child, was off limits for financial requests, but the family disappointment was an acceptable ATM. I didn't respond again. March came. I checked their county's public records website. Property tax was still unpaid, late fees accruing. I felt a weird mix of guilt and satisfaction scrolling through those records at 2 a.m. while eating stale Cheetos in my boxers. Not my proudest moment, but not my worst either. Dad called again in April, this time about the second mortgage payment being temporarily difficult. Asked for $3,000. I told him I was having my own financial issues. He switched tactics immediately, offering to help me budget better since I was obviously not managing my money well. The audacity of this man asking me for money while simultaneously criticizing my financial decisions, I just laughed and said I'd figure it out. Meanwhile, Kristen's candle business was tanking. Not that she'd admit it publicly, but her post went from "blessed to serve so many amazing customers" to vague inspirational quotes about weathering storms and true entrepreneurs never give up. Classic MLM death spiral. Mom started sending me links to job postings near their town. Subtle as a sledgehammer, that woman. I didn't respond to any of them, but I did notice they were all paying about half what I make now. They still think I'm scraping by on entry-level wages because I never corrected their assumptions. In May, I got a text from my aunt, Dad's sister, asking if everything was okay with my parents. Apparently, they had asked to borrow money from her too. First time in decades. She was concerned. I played dumb and said as far as I knew everything was fine. She mentioned Dad seemed stressed about retirement funds not performing as expected. Translation: the money was gone, and they were panicking. I started getting emails from Dad with links to articles about supporting aging parents and filial responsibility laws, subtle psychological warfare. I ignored those too. By June, things got more desperate. Mom called crying one night, said they might lose the house if they couldn't catch up on payments. Asked if I could move back home to help out by paying rent to them instead of wasting money on my apartment. I almost caved. Almost. But then she added, "Your father always said you'd come through eventually once you grew up enough to understand family obligations." And just like that, my spine re-solidified. The guilt evaporated. They weren't seeing me as a son they loved and needed help from. They were seeing me as the disappointing investment that might finally pay off. July brought the first real domino fall. I got a call from Dad that was different from the others. His voice had this edge I'd never heard before. Fear. Real fear, not manipulation. He said they'd received a letter about foreclosure proceedings if they didn't bring the mortgage current within 30 days. He didn't ask for money this time. Just started talking about how they might need to sell the house and downsize, how the market was terrible right now, how they'd lose their retirement nest egg, how Kristen was having her own problems and couldn't help. Then he said something that made me freeze. He said, "I know we haven't always been fair to you, Wesley. I know I've been hard on you, but we're family." First acknowledgement of unfairness in 31 years. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even close, but it was the first crack in the facade. I told him I'd think about how I could help, and I meant it. I did think about it for about 6 hours. Then I made a decision. I called a friend who works in real estate investing, asked about properties in pre-foreclosure in my parents' zip code. He sent me a list. Their address was on it. The amount needed to bring it current was just under $20,000. I had the money. I could have sent it. I could have been the hero. Instead, I contacted the mortgage company through my friend, made an offer to purchase the debt, not the house, just the debt. Became their creditor anonymously through an LLC my friend helped set up. Was it petty? Absolutely. Expensive? Yep. Worth it? TBD. August arrived. My parents received notice that their mortgage had been sold to a new company. The terms remained the same, but all communications would go through this new entity. Dad called me in a panic, said he didn't trust these vultures who buy distressed mortgages, asked me to look over the paperwork since I'm good with that stuff. I agreed and had him email me everything. Reading their financial documents was eye-opening. The interest rate was predatory. The terms were terrible. They'd been refinancing every few years, each time with worse conditions. No wonder they were drowning. I told Dad the new company seemed legitimate, but suggested he try to negotiate better terms. He said he'd try, but didn't sound hopeful. The real kicker came when I found out from the documents that they'd taken out a loan 3 years ago for $50,000 to invest in a business opportunity, Kristen's Candles. $50,000 that they'd never see again while telling me I was wasting my potential. 2 weeks later, Dad called again. The new mortgage company had denied their hardship request. Payment was due in full or foreclosure would proceed. He wasn't asking me for money anymore. He was just defeated. For the first time in my life, I heard my father's voice break. He said, "I don't know what to do, Wesley." I stayed silent for a moment, then told him I'd come visit that weekend to help figure things out. He thanked me. Actually thanked me. No backhanded compliment, no criticism, just gratitude. I drove to their house that Saturday. The lawn was overgrown. The garden gnome had fallen over, small signs of their world unraveling. Mom hugged me like I was returning from war again. Dad shook my hand, his grip weaker than I remembered. We sat at the kitchen table. Not the dining room with the wobbly-legged table, but the small kitchen table where real conversations happened when I was a kid. They laid out all their financial troubles. The mortgage, Dad's medical bills. They hadn't mentioned before. Kristen's business loans. They'd guaranteed the retirement account that was almost empty. They were drowning, and they knew it. Then Mom said something unexpected. She said, "We should have listened to you years ago when you told us Christian's business plan didn't make sense." Wait, what? They were acknowledging I had been right about something. The simulation was clearly glitching. Dad nodded along. Said I had always been good with numbers, and they should have valued that more. It wasn't an apology for the birthday dinner. It wasn't an apology for 31 years of emotional abuse, but it was something. I told them I'd help. I'd look at their finances and see what could be done. They seemed relieved, hopeful even. I went home and made some calls to their mortgage company, my company technically, to a financial advisor friend, to a lawyer. Then I waited. Last week they received a formal letter from the mortgage company. It outlined two options: bring the loan current immediately, enter into a restructuring agreement with strict conditions. They called me immediately asking what to do. I suggested option 2 and offered to look at the condition. The conditions were my condition: counseling, financial literacy court, a formal acknowledgement of assets and debts, and a meeting with the company representative, me, though they didn't know that yet, to discuss long-term solutions. They agreed instantly. The drowning don't question the lifeline. The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at my apartment. They don't know it's my company. They don't know I've seen every financial mistake they've made. They don't know I hold their future in my hands. The first domino has fallen, the rest will follow tomorrow. I'm not sure how I feel. Part of me wants to forgive them now that they're showing a glimmer of self-awareness. Part of me thinks they're only being nice because they need me. Part of me wants to see them truly understand what they've done. I guess I'll find out tomorrow which part wins. We'll update after the meeting. This is about to get interesting. Finally, update. So I'm sitting here at 3 a.m. with a half-empty energy drink trying to process what happened tonight. My hands are still shaking a bit as I type this. Not from fear or anger, but from something else I can't quite name yet. I spent all day preparing for my parents' visit, cleaned my apartment like a psycho, not because I cared what they thought, but because I needed to keep my hands busy. Changed my sheets even though they wouldn't see my bedroom. Organized the fridge, wiped down baseboards. Normal, totally not anxious behavior. I set up my dining table, IKEA, nothing fancy, with all the paperwork, their mortgage documents, payment history, the restructuring agreement, and a folder with what I called my receipts. Screenshots of texts, recorded voicemails, and notes from every time they'd put me down over the years. 31 years of evidence, labeled and organized. Ryan came over beforehand to check if I was okay, brought me tacos and made sure I wasn't spiraling. He offered to stay, but this was something I needed to do alone. Some battles you just have to face by yourself, I guess. At 6 exactly, my doorbell rang. I checked the doorbell camera on my phone. There they were. Mom looking nervous, Dad looking annoyed. Classic Terry and Glenn. I took a deep breath and buzzed them in. The elevator in my building is notoriously slow, so I had about 90 seconds to have my final internal freakout before facing them. Enough time to question every life choice that led me to this moment. Fun times. When I opened the door, the first thing I noticed was how small they looked. Dad's shoulders were hunched. Mom's hair had more gray than I remembered. They weren't the giants who had towered over my childhood. They were just old people. Worried old people. Mom hugged me. Dad did the awkward handshake thing again. I invited them in, offered water or coffee. Mom asked for water. Dad declined. Always too proud to accept anything, that man. We sat at the table. They eyed the stacks of papers nervously. Mom commented on how nice my apartment was, as if we were here for a casual visit, and not because they were about to lose their house. Dad asked when the mortgage company representative was arriving. I told him the representative was already here. They looked around confused, and then I slid the LLC registration across the table, the one with my name as the sole member, the one that now held their mortgage. The silence was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Mom's face went from confusion to shock. Dad's went from confusion to anger in about 3 seconds flat. He started sputtering about tricks and deception, asked if this was some kind of joke. His face turned that particular shade of red I remembered from childhood punishment. Mom just kept looking back and forth between me and the paper like her brain couldn't process the information. I stayed calm, told them it wasn't a joke, explained how I'd purchased their debt legally, how I was now effectively their lender, how their financial future was in my hands. Dad stood up so fast his chair almost fell over, started pacing around my living room, ranting about betrayal and family loyalty. The irony was apparently lost on him. Mom started crying quietly, not the loud, dramatic sobs she usually deployed when she wanted attention, but silent tears that seemed more genuine. I let Dad rant, let him get it all out. The whole time I just sat there, calm as could be, sipping my water. I'd been rehearsing this moment in my head for months, and now that it was here, I felt strangely detached, like I was watching a movie of my life, instead of living it. When he finally ran out of steam, I opened the folder of receipts, pulled out the transcript from my birthday dinner, read it back to them, word for word. Dad tried to brush it off as a joke, said I was too sensitive. Always had been. Mom said they never meant to hurt me, said family just talks that way sometimes. I played the recording, the actual audio, the sound of their laughter after Christine's comment about me tripping and crying, the sound of my silence. Mom stopped making excuses, then just looked down at her hands. Dad switched tactics, said I was getting revenge for some hurt feelings by destroying their lives, asked if that made me happy, if that made me feel like a big man. I told him that this wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. And then I laid out my terms. 1, they would acknowledge in writing the pattern of emotional abuse. 2, they would attend family counseling. With 3, they would take financial literacy. 4, they would never again comment on my life choices. 5, they would restructure the mortgage with fair terms that they could actually afford. If they agreed to all 5, I would help them keep their house and rebuild their financial stability. If not, I would proceed with the foreclosure. Dad called me every name in the book, said I was blackmailing them, manipulating them, using their misfortune against them, rich coming from him. TBH, I just sat there letting the storm wash over me. This was the last gasp of his control over me, and we both knew it. Mom finally spoke up, asked Dad to sit down and be quiet. Actually told him to shut up. In 31 years, I had never heard her tell him to shut up. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and asked if I hated them. Not angrily, not defensively, just a simple broken question. And that's when I felt it crack, that wall I'd built between us. Because the truth was, I didn't hate them. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. It would have been easier, but I didn't. I told her no. I didn't hate them. I just wanted them to see me, the real me, not the disappointment they decided I was when I was still learning to walk. I wanted them to take responsibility for the pain they'd caused. I wanted them to do better. Mom started crying again, said she had failed me as a mother, said she should have stood up for me, said she was sorry. Dad was silent for a long time, the kind of heavy silence that feels like it might never end. Then he looked at the papers on the table, at the mortgage, at the transcripts, at the restructuring agreement with my terms. And he broke, not dramatically, not with tears and wailing, but with a simple, quiet admission. Said he had been wrong about me. Said he had been jealous, if he was being honest. Jealous that I had found my own path instead of following his. Jealous that I had built something he didn't understand. I didn't know what to say. 31 years of wanting to hear those words. And when they finally came, I had no response prepared. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Not comfortable silence, but not the hostile silence of before either. Just processing silence. Then I pulled out the restructured mortgage agreement, showed them the terms, lower interest, extended payoff period, manageable monthly payments, explained how we could make it work if they were serious about changing. Dad asked why I would help them after everything. A fair question. I told him because I was better than the example they had set. Not to be petty, but because it was true. They signed the agreement, all of it, including the acknowledgement of emotional abuse, including the commitment to counseling, including the financial literacy. As they were getting ready to leave, Mom hugged me again, whispered, "Thank you," in my ear. Dad shook my hand, then awkwardly pulled me into a stiff hug. Progress, I guess. They left around 9. I sat on my couch for hours afterward, emotionally drained but somehow lighter. Then at midnight, my phone started blowing up. Texts from Kristen, angry, all-caps messages about how I had manipulated our elderly parents and forced them to sign papers and how she was going to expose me. Apparently, they had gone straight to her house after leaving mine, told her everything, and of course she saw herself as the defender of family honor. I didn't respond to her texts, just muted the conversation and went to bed. At 1 a.m., my doorbell started ringing. Over and over, I checked the camera. Kristen was there, looking like she was about to explode. I didn't answer, just watched through the app as she rang again and again, then started pounding on the door. Then she moved to the window, screaming my name, demanding I come out and face her. My neighbors were definitely loving this middle-of-the-night show. I snapped a screenshot of her rage-contorted face on my doorbell camera. It really was priceless. The golden child, finally facing the reality that her kingdom was built on quicksand. I sent the screenshot to my parents with a simple message. Your daughter is currently harassing me at my home. This ends now, or the deal is off. 10 minutes later, Christine's husband's car pulled up. He practically had to drag her away from my building. My doorbell camera caught the whole thing in HD. Might make it my new profile pic. TBH. Dad called immediately after, apologized for Kristen's behavior, said it wouldn't happen again. He sounded different. Subdued, like he finally understood the power dynamic had shifted. It's been a week since then. We had our first counseling session yesterday over Zoom because I'm not ready to be in the same room with them for that kind of conversation yet. Baby steps. It was awkward and painful and necessary. The therapist didn't let anyone off the hook, especially when Dad tried to minimize some of the things he'd said to me. Mom cried a lot. Dad looked uncomfortable the entire time. I felt validated for maybe the first time ever. We have another session scheduled for next week, and financial literacy classes start for them on Monday. Kristen still isn't speaking to me. That's fine. I'm not ready to deal with her anyway. I'm not naive enough to think 31 years of damage can be fixed in a week or a month or maybe ever. But something has shifted. Something fundamental. They see me now, really see me, not as the disappointment, not as the weird kid who liked computers instead of sports, but as a person with value, with power. Is it sad that I had to take control of their financial future to get that recognition? Absolutely. Does that make the recognition less meaningful? I'm still figuring that out. My friend Ryan thinks I'm being too generous, says I should have let them lose everything, says they don't deserve a second chance. Maybe he's right, but this isn't about what they deserve. It's about who I want to be, and I don't want to be someone who uses power to hurt others, even when they've hurt me. That would make me too much like my dad. So here we are 1 year after that birthday dinner. Everything different, and yet somehow the same. I don't know if we'll ever have a normal family relationship. I don't know if the changes they're showing are permanent or just survival tactics. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust them. But I do know this. I'm not that silent kid at the dinner table. And I have a voice, I have boundaries, I have worth that doesn't depend on their recognition. And that, I guess, is the real victory here. Thanks for coming along on this journey with me, Reddit. Your comments and support have meant more than you know. I might post updates if anything significant changes, but for now I'm focusing on healing and moving forward. Oh, and my 32nd birthday is next month. I'm celebrating it with friends. Just friends. And it's going to be awesome. Like today's story? A super thanks helps me keep bringing you the best daily content. Your support means I can keep doing what I love. Thanks for being awesome.